Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be diving in.
Yeah, so today we're looking at some really interesting arguments from Abundance, the book by Ezra Klein and Thompson.
Right.
And our mission basically is to figure out what they're saying about why we still have so much scarcity. Energy, housing,
Yeah. The
healthcare.
big ones.
Exactly. And how they think we could actually get to, well, abundance.
So for you listening, if you want the key takeaways without wading through everything, this is sort of your shortcut.
Right. We're using insights mainly from a pretty helpful YouTube overview of the book.
And it kicks off with this compelling vision, doesn't it? Like a future with clean energy everywhere, maybe cultivated food.
Yeah, a world beyond the old resource limits.
But then, bam.
Yeah.
Straight into the reality that scarcity is still very much with us.
That contrast is key. Sets up their whole argument. They show this potential future and then immediately say, hold on, we're still stuck in shortages in fundamental ways.
And the core idea, the really provocative part, is that this isn't destiny. It's choice.
Exactly. That scarcity is often a result of choices we're making, maybe without even realizing it fully. We'll unpack those choices.
Okay, so this idea of choosing scarcity. The authors argue that, here we are, 21st century America.
Yeah.
We say we want abundance, we talk about progress, but our actions often seem to lead elsewhere.
It's like we're actively, if maybe unintentionally, creating scarcity.
Yeah.
Take climate change. We mostly agree we need to do something, right?
Broadly, yes.
But then look at the specifics. States shutting down nuclear plants, zero carbon energy sometimes for local political reasons, not climate reasons.
With perfectly good solar projects getting blocked by local opposition.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what's really driving those decisions.
It does. It suggests the stated goal isn't always the one winning out.
And you see a similar thing with housing, right? Everyone agrees shelter is basic.
Fundamental need, yeah.
But in the cities with the most jobs, the most dynamism,
Yeah.
and it's just becoming impossible for so many people to afford to live there. Why?
The numbers they use are just wow. 1950 median home price is about 2 times the average yearly income.
Manageable, you could say.
Totally. By 2020, it's 6 times.
6 times. That's not just a little increase. That fundamentally changes who gets to live where.
It really does. It warps the function of cities, doesn't it? And what about social mobility?
Exactly. It's not just about your monthly budget. It's about access to opportunity. And then healthcare. We all want better care, longer lives.
Of course. New treatments, breakthroughs.
But the authors question if our system, the funding, the regulations, is actually set up to deliver that efficiently. Or is it slowing things down, driving up costs?
And those costs, they hit families hard. That stat about employer health insurance premiums, under $6,000 in 1999 for a family plan, now almost $24,000 in 2023.
Oof. That's a huge chunk of income just vanishing.
It's like another tax, really. Are we getting proportionate value, or is the system itself the problem?
And education follows the pattern, seen as crucial, the great equalizer.
The ladder up.
But college costs, through the roof. Public colleges, average yearly cost, a few $100 in 1970.
Okay.
Over $11,000 by 2023.
Wow. So the ladder's getting really, really expensive to climb.
It's like that analogy they use building a ladder to a rising elevator.
Right. We focus on making the expensive thing affordable.
Financial aid, loans.
Instead of asking why the elevator is rising so fast in the first place, why is it getting so expensive?
It feels like we're stuck managing scarcity, maybe, rather than creating more supply or fundamentally changing the cost structure.
But maybe there's a shift. The authors seem to think so.
Yeah, they suggest there's this dawning realization, perhaps, that just throwing money at the problems isn't working.
Right.
That maybe we need to look at the supply side. Things like the Inflation Reduction Act, the GPS Act.
You could see those as attempts, maybe early ones, to actually build capacity, to address the root causes of scarcity, a focus on supply.
It's a potential shift in the political conversation, moving beyond just distribution.
Okay, and that connects to their point about the fixed pie idea, doesn't it?
Absolutely. They really push back against thinking of wealth or progress as just dividing up what already exists.
Because that's not how growth really happens historically.
Their argument is, no, real growth is transformative. It's about creating completely new things, new possibilities. Think invention, innovation.
Not just a bigger slice of the same pie, but entirely new bakeries.
Exactly. New recipes, new ingredients we haven't even thought of yet.
And the key ingredient for that kind of transformation, they argue, is technology.
Right. They're pretty clear. We can't solve the really big problems, climate, global poverty, just by redistributing current resources. We need new tools.
Better ways of doing things.
Look at solar and wind power costs plummeting. That wasn't redistribution. That was technological progress.
Or batteries getting good enough that California feels it can mandate an end to new gas car sales.
Those are potential game changers, driven by tech.
But it's not enough just to invent the tech, is it?
No, that's crucial. The authors stress it has to be developed and widely deployed. Accessible.
So everyone can benefit.
It connects to that Marshall McLuhan idea, maybe. We are all crew on Spaceship Earth. We need to be actively involved in shaping how technology gets used for the common good.
Right. Not just passengers along for the ride.
Okay, so where does a lot of this innovation and wealth creation happen? Cities.
The book frames cities as the new frontier, right? Not open land anymore.
Yeah, but there's a catch. That old bargain, higher wages in cities, but also higher costs, that seems broken.
How so?
Because housing costs have just gone into the stratosphere in many of these productive cities.
So the higher wages get eaten up?
Pretty much. It's like getting a pay cut just by living where the opportunities are supposed to be.
And that undermines the whole point of cities as engines of opportunity, doesn't it?
The authors argue yes. They should be escalators, not exclusive clubs. If you can't afford to move there, that American frontier is closed off.
Which is ironic because cities are where innovation thrives. That density matters.
Think about AI right now. Centered in the Bay Area, one of the most expensive places on Earth.
Companies pay that premium for the concentration of talent, the buzz, the ideas bumping into each other.
And research backs this up. Ed Glazer's work.
Right, The Economist.
He shows people are just more productive in bigger metro areas, even after you account for education and stuff. Proximity itself boosts output.
There's just something about being physically near other smart, motivated people.
Which might be why so many companies are pulling people back to the office, at least some of the time.
Yeah, that trend seems real.
It's hard to replicate that spontaneous collaboration, that learning by osmosis, remotely. Glazer even says we're kind of evolved to learn best from people nearby.
So if cities are becoming unaffordable, and that's where opportunity and productivity are highest, that sounds bad for upward mobility.
It does. And look at Raj Chetty's research. It's sobering.
The odds of earning more than your parents.
Plummeted. From over 90% for kids born in 1940 down to 50-50 for those born in the 80s.
Wow, half! The American dream feels statistically shaky.
And the authors connect this back to scarcity, especially in cities, arguing a lot of it is, well, self-inflicted.
Okay, let's dig into those self-inflicted wounds. Zoning is a big one they talk about.
Right. Started simply, keep the glue factory away from the houses. Sensible.
But it evolved
into something much more complex, often used, especially in wealthier areas, to limit any new housing or only allow certain types like single-family homes, basically anti-growth tools.
And the examples are stark. Fewer homes built in LA decade after decade, even as the population grew.
Or Westchester County, New York, rezoning to basically prevent density, locking in low populations.
Bergen County, NJ, essentially banning apartments by 1970.
Add all that up across desirable areas, and you get a massive artificial cap on housing supply.
Which basic economics pushes prices up.
Dramatically, making housing unaffordable.
California is the poster child, isn't it? Population actually shrank recently, partly because people just couldn't afford to live there anymore.
And the irony. You see these progressive places, kindness is everything signs.
Yeah.
But facing massive homelessness crises fueled by the lack of affordable housing.
Which leads to their point about homelessness itself. They challenge the standard narratives.
They argue, yes, poverty, mental health, addiction are factors, big ones. But the main driver, the thing that turns vulnerability into actual homelessness on a mass scale,
is the lack of affordable housing.
Exactly. If there's nowhere cheap enough to live, people fall through the cracks.
That California versus West Virginia comparison really hits this home.
Right. West Virginia has higher rates of poverty, addiction, mental illness.
But way less homelessness per capita than California.
6 times less, roughly.
Yeah.
The key difference, housing costs.
It really reframes it as a housing supply problem, fundamentally.
Then there's the home ownership paradox. Owning a home feels secure.
The dream, yeah.
But your main asset's value depends, partly, on keeping housing scarce for others. It creates this built-in conflict of interest.
Between homeowners and renters or potential buyers. Okay, what about environmentalism? That seems like a force for good.
And the authors agree, historically. It was crucial. Mid-20th century pollution was terrifying.
LA smog, rivers on fire, you needed action?
Absolutely. Silent Spring, Earth Day, The Clean Water Act, vital progress, no question.
But
But they argue that some environmental regulations, created with good intentions, have become tools for delay and obstruction, even for green projects sometimes.
like CEQA in California, the Environmental Quality Act.
Yeah. Intended for review, but now it can be used to challenge almost anything, sometimes for non-environmental reasons. It gums up the works.
So Californication went from meaning sprawl to meaning regulatory gridlock.
Sort of. It captures that complexity, those unintended consequences.
And they push back on degrowth, too, the idea we need to shrink economies.
They see it as unrealistic globally and potentially self-defeating politically, alienating people you need on board for climate action.
Beyond specific rules, there's this bigger theme of process getting in the way of outcomes.
Right. This idea of democracy by lawsuit, maybe an unintended legacy of the environmental movement where challenging things in court became a primary tactic.
Leading to delays, focusing on procedure over results. They mention Ralph Nader's influence here.
Contributing to what they call a procedure fetish in some government functions. Following the rules becomes the goal, not solving the problem.
And when progress stalls because everything is so complex, public trust erodes.
Definitely. And you get the green dilemma. Even climate-friendly projects get stuck in environmental review loops.
They also note, maybe controversially, the sheer number of lawyers in U.S. politics as potentially reinforcing this focus on process.
It's a system that values procedure. Let's look at some cases where these bottlenecks really show up.
Okay, like that Tahanan housing project in San Francisco, modular housing.
Yeah, a perfect storm. Goal. Build faster, cheaper housing for the homeless? Great. Opposition from labor wanting local jobs, not factory-built modules. Plus, layers of local rules, progressive goals clashing with each other.
Gridlock again.
Or LA's homelessness services system. Heidi Marston described it. So many funding sources, each with its own rules, its own audits.
So the focus shifts from helping people
to just managing the bureaucracy, checking the boxes for all the different funders, process over people.
And the GPS Act, trying to boost semiconductor manufacturing.
Good goal. But the question is, by adding lots of secondary goals, environmental standards, diversity requirements, whatever.
Do you dilute the main mission? Does it slow things down, make us less competitive? It's a trade-off.
Then there's California high-speed rail. Oh boy.
The poster child for delays and cost overruns.
Pretty much. Years behind. Billions over budget. And that decision to start building in the Central Valley.
Why there?
Federal funding priorities linked to air quality in disadvantaged areas. Not necessarily the most logical place to start if your goal is connecting LA and SF efficiently.
So competing goals again, plus heavy reliance on pricey consultants.
And remember California's EDD, the unemployment system during COVID.
A total meltdown for many people.
Outdated systems, rigid rules, couldn't hire people fast enough. Jennifer Polka's work highlighted how crucial simplification is. Just removing needless rules so systems can actually function.
Okay, so lots of examples of things getting stuck. But there are breakthroughs too, right?
Absolutely. The mRNA vaccines are a prime example. A stunning success story.
From niche science to global lifesaver, incredibly fast.
But it wasn't easy. Scientists like Catalin Carrico faced years of rejection from traditional funders.
Why?
Her mRNA approach was seen as too risky, too unconventional compared to established methods.
So who backed her?
Private companies like Moderna and BioNTech saw the potential when government grants didn't. It highlights what the authors call the Carrico problem.
A bias against high-risk, high-reward science in the system.
Potentially, yeah. A preference for safer bets.
And then Operation Warp Speed. Controversial politically, but...
The authors frame it as effective government action. Not just money, but a strategy. Investing in multiple vaccine types at once, anticipating manufacturing needs like ordering special glass vials way ahead of time, and coordinating complex distribution. It was proactive intervention.
Which leads to this idea of government as a bottleneck detective.
Yeah, instead of one-size-fits-all policies, figure out the specific thing holding back progress in an industry and target that.
Like using advanced market commitments, AMCs.
Exactly. Guaranteeing you'll buy a new technology if it gets developed. That de-risks innovation.
We saw that with vaccines for diseases in poorer countries.
And now with carbon removal tech, like the Frontier Initiative, promising a market to spur development.
So putting it all together, do Klein and Thompson think we can actually move towards this politics of abundance? Are they optimistic?
Cautiously optimistic, I'd say. They see potential openings. Maybe current approaches aren't working.
On both left and right.
Yeah, failures and missed opportunities, creating space for something new. The YMBY movement pushing for housing.
Right. Yes, in my backyard.
Some Democratic governors passing pro-housing laws. These could be signs of a shift.
But it won't be easy.
No. Dismantling old systems, changing mindsets, building new coalitions, that's hard work. Requires challenging sacred cows.
And it needs nuance. Understanding the specific burials in each sector. No silver bullets.
Right. They hark back to the ambition of things like the old world fairs, reminding us that big progress requires vision and commitment.
And maybe, they suggest, we're at a point where the old political order, the sort of neoliberal consensus, is fraying.
Creating an opening for a new focus. Perhaps one centered on building abundance, like the New Deal shifted things decades ago.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the big takeaway seems to be, scarcity isn't always inevitable.
A lot of it stems from choices, from complex rules, maybe focusing too much on managing scarcity instead of creating abundance, and being too afraid of risk.
And getting to abundance requires a real shift, thinking differently, embracing building, invention.
Actively finding and removing roadblocks, fostering a culture that supports innovation and effective execution.
So a final thought maybe for you listening, think about your own world, your community. Where do you see scarcity?
And ask yourself, is that scarcity unavoidable? Or is it maybe partly the result of choices, rules, priorities, inertia? What would it take, big or small, to choose abundance in that area instead?
Something to chew on. Finding that balance between smart rules and getting things done, between innovation and government action to build a better future.